Hello, everybody, and welcome again to our podcast live. Today, we have an amazing guest, Henry Woodman. We are very, very excited to have you today. We have CMO here, our COO, and Gabby, our business development leader, and our queen and answer questions. So, if you have questions, guys, please go ahead and I'm nervous.
Ask away.
Please go ahead and type your questions so Gabby can actually collect them and ask them all the way to Henry. Henry, we are very, very excited to have you today. You have an amazing journey from tech entrepreneur to go to Honduras for a lost city. You are a writer, you are a TV producer. How are you today? Let us know.
I am incredible. Wow, I got to follow all that stumbling with question answering and stuff. I'm ready to go. Bring it on.
Awesome, Henry. So let's just go and start with the first question. And we just want to know, who is Henry Woodman? Can you please walk us through your incredible journey, from searching for a lost city in Honduras? And how is that a story about a teenager becoming a tech entrepreneur and an Emmy nominated producer?
Wow. Wow. There's like way too many things to unravel, but let's just go with who I am. I often look at it and I would say I'm more of a hedonistic and let's call it a hedonistic and opportunistic entrepreneur, which basically means I do shit that I enjoy and that makes me happy. And I take advantage of opportunities that present themselves. Because if you say, how did you get from, this to a tech entrepreneur? I'm like, I was not planned, it just kind of happened because opportunities presented themselves. I'll just start and then we can weave it in. But, when I was a teenager at 16, my father, who was part of this group called the International Explorer Society, had heard about this lost city in the jungles of Honduras called Ciudad Blanca, right? And, it was deep in the jungles in the Mosquito Coast, which nobody wanted to go because it was a real nightmare. And so, of course, he thought, well, what a great idea to send my teenage sons there for summer, right? Like we have nothing better to do. But it was, we had these fantasies of, we're going to get on the Johnny Carson show. Those are for the old people. And we're going to be the founders of this lost city. And, it sounded all romantic. And then when you got there, it was nothing further from the truth. We were like, had no food. We were suffering. It was rained out. It was hot. There were animals that would kill you. So we eventually made it through a couple of months. We did find some ruins. We did not find the lost city. We probably walked over it because 40 years later, they had a team that came in with LiDAR and looked under the canopy, and they said they found stuff, but it's fairly inaccessible. I mean, there are no roads, there are no way to get in there. You got to hack your way through the jungle. Even for a 16-year-old moron, it was a very arduous task. So that was the jungle journey.
That sounds like the kind of place I would like to live. Very hard for other people to get to. That sounds fantastic.
I will tell you a story. He's long gone, but there was a guy, back in the day, the United Fruit Company had sent people into that area to get rid of people in their way, right? So this guy, Raimundo, was there essentially hiding out. I mean, it took 2 days to get in. He was living in a mahogany hut, completely self-contained, with a Honduran wife and a couple of people working on this little plantation, if you will. You could not get there, but he was an assassin for the fruit company. And he just went in there and said, I'm going to live out my life. He had a shortwave radio. He had a little thing to make generator stuff. So he was living really off the grid as far as you can go.
All right, that's one way to do it. All right, so how do you go from a kid in the middle of, I'm assuming it's a rainforest out there?
Yeah, it's a jungle.
And then out of nowhere, you're like, you know what? I think I'd rather be a tech entrepreneur.
It didn't happen. So I leave Honduras. I go to college in Tucson, Arizona, and in my sophomore year, I'm sitting around in a laundromat with a pocket full of quarters and a serious addiction to Pac-Man, right? I have a pocket full of quarters that just want to be put into a Pac-Man machine, and I can't find a Pac-Man machine because I got to watch my clothes. And so I thought, wow, I'm going to call the laundromats and see if they have video game machines. I'm going to go there. And none of them did. So I said, would you like a video game machine? And, a couple said yes. I don't know why I said that because I had no money, but I took my college savings and I went to an auction and I bought these crappy machines because back in the day they had these malls and they had these video arcades, and in the back of the arcade were the machines nobody would play, and then they eventually got rid of them at an auction. So I bought one, I put it into a laundromat. Within a couple of months, it paid for itself. I took the money and I bought another one, and eventually I had video games and laundromats. So I'm like, okay, video games, okay. But what I really want to do is get into the film and television business, and that, because ABC Film Crew came and filmed our little adventure in Honduras when I was 16. And I thought, man, these guys don't have to sit at a desk. It's not a 9-to-5 job. They get to travel. They get to have fun. This is what I want to do, right? So I'm thinking I'm going to go to Los Angeles and produce and direct movies. That did not happen. I did get into doing travel films, starting as a PA, a production assistant, and then going on to, sound guy, and eventually producing films. And after several years of travel films, Chile in Latin America went from a dictatorship with Pinochet to a democracy. And as a result, they added new television stations and a new network. Thus, opportunity presented itself. They needed content, right? So I because we had a production partner there when we shot for Eastern Airlines. And I went down there and I said, hey, listen, I'm an American producer. I got this idea for a game show. It's called Machos. I ripped off an idea from the US shows. And sure enough, we had it on the air in a couple of months, and I'm there producing game shows in Chile. We're going to get to the tech thing in a second. So I'm sitting in a edit bay in Chile, and somebody gives me a CD-ROM and says, take a look at this. This is the early 90s, right? And it's a 360-degree virtual tour on a CD-ROM. And I'm like, oh my God, I can look up and down and all around. This is the coolest thing ever. And I don't have to travel around the world with a bunch of guys and all this luggage. I can just take one camera and shoot virtual tours. Yeah. So I set up a company called World Travel Vision. Now we're in the mid-90s. And, I start doing these virtual tours for destinations and hotels and governments. And eventually, the hotels and the destinations asked me, how do we get these things onto this new World Wide Web thingy? I'm like, I don't know, send them a CD-ROM. That's what I was doing. I was giving them a CD-ROM so they could go to the trade shows, right? Let me see what I can do to help, right? So eventually I realized, the value isn't in the production because, any kid with a camera and a computer will now be a competitor. The value is in the distribution because that's an ongoing fee. So I start getting into trying to figure out how to produce and then distribute the virtual tours to this new, online travel site community. And then eventually I find out, well, the real value isn't the virtual tours, it's the photos, because they didn't really exist. Those old systems had the rate and the availability. They did not have photos. So that's where we've slowly morphed from production of virtual tours to production distribution of virtual tours to then the distribution of photos. So that means I had to get tech guys because I couldn't write a line of code if you put a gun to my head. And I said, this is what we want to do. This is the goal. Here's what it looks like, with an idea that you build this technology and, you deliver it and you're done. Nothing could be further from the truth. But now, years later, if you go to any travel website on the planet and you see photos of hotels, they generally would have come from my old company, which of course I sold. That's how I got into the tech business.
Wow. So then you were getting paid. So did you end up, were you able to patent that idea?
No, you can't patent an idea. You can only patent the expression of the idea. We looked at a couple of things to patent, but the idea could have been, you change one manner of how it's delivered and it's, the patent becomes useless and you're going to fight it. You're going to waste time and money. It is a huge moat and a barrier to entry because once you connect to all these travel sites, and it took me the better part of 20 years, then you have the ability to deliver. And then you can get groups like, Wyndham, and, you can go to build this wonderful technology, go to Wyndham, the largest hotel group in the world. And you say, listen, I have this great technology, size, tag, categorize, and it'll deliver your stuff everywhere. And they'll say, great. All right. Where can you deliver? And you say, well, we're working on a deal with Expedia. And they're like, yeah, what about everybody else? Booking and Despegar and all these others in different parts of the world and Asia and Latin America. And you're like, well, that'll take me a while. They go, yeah, good. Call me when you get there. Right. So the fact that we built it up with the virtual reality, we had the connections, and then we started connecting the photos, and then we essentially built on that, manually uploaded in the beginning to eventually automating everything with APIs. So if you're a hotel group thinking of changing to another technology, it's like getting a divorce, right? We're already pulling from your servers. We're doing all the magic. We're taking it everywhere. Separating all those is very difficult. So we never lost a client, put it that way.
In sales, we call that making yourself sticky.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So, all right. So during this journey, what was one of the highlights? What was one of the turning points where something happened and you're like, okay, everything changed. Everything's different. We need to make an adjustment. And then how did you make that happen?
Yeah, I think there were several times we pivoted, and obviously the pivoting was a matter of going for the opportunity, right? Producing virtual tours was not a long-term strategy because it's a one-off. Producing, delivering wasn't because it's not the need to have, it's the nice to have. When we started distributing, there was one competitor, and they ended up getting exclusive deals with 4 GDSs, the global distribution systems, which were really everything. Right? I mean, everything. We could not continue without the GDSs. One hotel group, that was Starwood, said, we like you guys. Can you do the photo thing? This is when we do the virtual tours. And we said, yeah, lying. Sure. So we had to figure it out, how to get around it and manually do this stuff on their behalf, which is why I say. So literally, we survived for 5 years when those exclusives were in place, but knowing all along that when the exclusives ended and people weren't happy, we would take advantage of the opportunity. So the year those exclusives ended, it was the summer, and within 12 months, we went from 1,000 hotels with Starwood to 22,000 within, because all along we kept talking to hotels. Okay, so how's it going? What's going on? What are you happy with? What are you not happy with? By the way, when does your contract expire? So we already knew all the backstory of what we wanted to do and what they wanted and what was missing and how we could make it better. So they were fairly arrogant, our competitor that is, because they were a monopoly and they didn't really innovate. And then they were raising rates and, they were kind of litigious. So we took advantage. And when we signed Wyndham at the time, it was, one of the third groups. That was a huge win, and that everything sort of cascaded from there and dominoed down and eventually took over the industry.
So while your competitor was acting like a BlackBerry who just got fat and didn't innovate, you guys were in the background just improving your infrastructure, perfecting your craft, and then just waiting for the opportunity to strike.
Correct. And surviving and hoping that we can take advantage of that opportunity, because you never know. That's one of the things in technology. Shit changes quickly. If you're distributing DVDs one year and next thing you know, everything's in the cloud, you're like, oh my God, nobody wants DVDs anymore, right?
Blockbuster to Netflix happened overnight. Yep.
Yeah.
So, all right. So on that, so let me ask a question, because a lot of our audience is in sales or in the sales world.
Poor bastards.
Yeah. So knowing that you have all these contracts and all of these expirations are coming up in the summer, when did you guys start your sales process to these deals?
So they didn't all the contracts didn't end in the summer. We just knew when the exclusives with the competitor was ending, and then we would tier it in through the year because we know when they're coming. So what we did, another thing that we had to sort of survive was we were taking photos, virtual reality tours with cameras, right? So there were trade shows and conferences for the industry, distribution things, right? And so we would trade a booth and entry into the trade show for photography. We'll take pictures of your conference and we'll do all the photography and we'll put it online and we'll trade that. There, we met many of the movers and shakers in the distribution world for the imagery, and we would start having the conversations. Now, this is a very long sale because these are big sales, right? Wyndham has almost 10,000 hotels. So it's not an easy sale like, hey, come out into the store and buy this stuff. It would take anywhere from 6 to 8 months to several years. And I mean, we would plant seeds. we would call them regularly. We would just be comfortable. We would say, listen, for example, hey, I'm flying to Dallas in a couple of weeks to go see some clients, and I'd love to see if we can stop by. Which for the most part was BS because I wasn't meeting any clients. I wanted to meet them. I just made that as an excuse, and they'd always say yes, right? And so if you meet them face to face and you see them at conferences and you send them Christmas stuff, like we had these really cool calendars that, after we stopped doing it, people were like, what happened to my calendars, right? So we would constantly stay top of mind, if you will, not to be too much of a pest, like call them every week. We'd call them every couple of weeks, every couple of months, and just check in, but always sort of knowing, hey, his contract expires at the end of 2026. All right, 8 months before, I'm going to start to make a concerted effort because it's a couple months that it's going to need to change. I mean, it's a tech platform.
I love that you said that. I started my career in sales, and everything was based on when your contract expired or when your term was coming up. And I made it a point 18 months before that time. That's when the trickle starts, to the point when the contract is up, they think you're their rep anyway. They didn't realize they were switching vendors because their vendor reaches out the last second to renew them while I've been building up this rapport. It's funny that it was the same. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. The art of sales is the art of sales. It doesn't matter what you're selling. So I love that you said that. That's fantastic.
I mean, at the end of the day, sales is, for lack of a better, is solving somebody's problem. If I hear somebody say, listen, I got this really cool thing, it's really neat and does, but what problem are you solving? Now, in this case, hotels had a problem. How do I get my images everywhere, right? Keep them accurate, keep the right, the captions, the codes, the room types, and there are different room types. I mean, some with breakfast, some without, some with wedding plan, they have to have champagne. So there were a lot of little behind the scenes stuff. But all of that is really, we're solving a problem. They don't have the bandwidth to do it, and they're not connected via APIs because these systems are different than the reservation, the availability and the cost system.
And if I don't, I was going to say, if I don't let Aleja ask the next question.
I need to stop you right there. So, Gabby, she has a lot of questions. Go, Gabby.
Thank you, Kate. You have worn many hats: explorer, CEO, producer, author. Which of those roles felt the most natural to you, and which one pushed you out of your comfort zone?
Wow. I think the one most natural would probably be producer. And that's a misnomer because, I recently published a book that I did not write, but I bought the rights to. And we're developing that for a series. Now, a producer essentially doesn't know a lot about a lot of things. They just know a lot about many things, right? I know a little bit about what the director does, what the gaffer does, what the lighting guy does, what the writer does, right? I'm not writing it. I'm not, and for this part, I'm really not the producer. I'm the executive producer, meaning I'm bringing the IP to the table, and a producer or a showrunner will do the nuts and bolts and make sure, the trains run on time, as it were. It makes it a little bit easier sort of from a leadership perspective that I don't have to get into the day-to-day nitty-gritty, which is what I like. I'm not a, very detail-oriented. I like the big picture, like the vision, if you will, and then here's your marching orders and the leadership thing, and then make sure it goes and not micromanage. So I think the producer, more of an executive producer role, does that best, at least for me.
Did delegating those responsibilities come easy to you, or is that something you had to work on?
Oh my God, it never came easy because, you always think you can do it better. And like, you morons, what are you doing? When I started, I had no idea what I was doing. Let's be clear. I would start little businesses and it was just me, myself, and I was taking video game machines around, and then, crew which is a beginning, middle, and an end. You shoot a travel film. There isn't continuity. When you have an ongoing concern or a business, then you have a different animal. And if you don't have structure and process in place, it's very difficult to have a foundation to grow and scale with, right? So in the beginning, little things like people would say, oh, you got to hire the best people. And I'm thinking, I can't even afford myself. What do you mean the best people? I didn't understand that it was got to find the culture fit, people that, really buy into the vision. And then, I hear things in my head where my dad would say, he was in the airline industry. He would say, yeah, meetings are a waste of time. Nothing happens. And of course, I never had meetings, right? And then I realized, well, yeah, if you structure meetings properly and you have an agenda, oh, yeah, okay, got it. So they do serve a purpose, right? So I think the leadership comes because at the end of the day, many years ago, somebody handed me a book by Gino Wickman called Traction. Now, we were so in love with that book that my backdoor password to my technology was Gino Wickman, right? And we ended up buying a book for every employee and say, read this is our Bible. We're going to set everything up and we're going to live this sort of EOS platform, the entrepreneur's operating system, right? And that helped me understand what exactly I needed to do to set all that in place. What Traction does really well is it helps you set the business up, processes and procedures, but it doesn't do a good job with sales and marketing, in my opinion. Everything else works. Sales and marketing is a completely different animal that depends on the industry as well.
Agreed.
Henry, you were talking about the book that you didn't write, but you kind of were like helping. So let's talk about a book. What inspired the book? How that story happened?
So over 40 years ago, my father, who was a writer as well, had written a tribute to a friend, not planning on publishing this. He had a manuscript in his garage. My sister's helping him move, and she asks him about it. He says, yeah, it's a story, this love story. And she says, a love story, Dad? It's like, really? She reads it. She loves it. I'm in LA, as I said, trying to produce and direct movies. That wasn't happening. So she calls me up. She's like, you got to read this thing. Dad wrote a love story and it's amazing. And I'm like, Dad, really? That lecherous pig? Come on. And so I read it. I was in tears. I could not believe it. So then I'm thinking, okay, Dad, what's going on? He goes, yeah, no, I'm not really. It was a tribute. I go, can I buy it? I buy it for $1, right? And I call a friend of mine who's producing a movie and I said, listen, you got to read this because it feels nepotistic. I don't know if it's any good. He reads it. 3 days later, he's like, oh my God, we have got to do this. He ends up going into real estate. I go to Chile to produce, game shows. I said, one of these days, so after selling the company, I said, the world has changed. Instead of making a movie out of this book, I think we should do a series and do a much deeper dive. It's about a guy who finds his soulmate, except she died 70 years earlier. And then he believes he finds her reincarnated. So really the idea is, this echoes of the past, does karma exist? Is there such a thing as reincarnation? Or are we paying back sins of the father? And there's a lot of trippy stuff going on here.
Have we seen this yet, or is this in progress?
It's in progress, and a painful progress at that. The industry is falling apart. It's very challenging. There's a very sort of good old boys club network. So you got to get to an agent, which I never thought I wanted to get an agent. And then the agent has to work with others to package it because there's just gazillions of people out there with product that they want to sell and think they're going to make a fortune. Now, I had a producer last week call me up. He goes, I could not put this thing down. I want to get an option to go peddle it. So we're working on an option, but he wants to do a movie where I want to also then take it into a series because it's a far deeper dive. It's a very simplistic linear thing. And what we've done is a far deeper dive. So this is years in the making. It's probably going to come out as a movie. And then maybe later, if that does well, it'll come out as a series called Slippin', which is a play on slipping through time or slipping. My mind is slipping. This is all a figment of my imagination.
Well, put it this way, I've seen they did that with The Gentleman, where they had the movie first and they did the series. They did it with Jack Reacher. That's done very, very well. So I don't think you'll have an issue with that.
Yeah. Well, it's even yesterday I had a guy who produces over 100 hours of stuff every year. He's really good. He goes, it's all documentary and it's not fiction stuff. It's nonfiction things, like Spycraft on Netflix, shit like that. Right. And he goes, it's just such a tough business and it's only getting worse because of the TikToks and the Instagrams of the world. The attention span is so short. Watch TV like they used to. Right. And I'm like, yeah, well, there's still old farts like me that will watch a series.
So let me tell you though, on that, and it's something that we do really well here is we do a lot of clips and reels of our podcasts and we put them out there. And the last 3 series I've watched have come from snippets. Like Billy Bob Thornton did one, where he was played an attorney, and I'd never heard of it, and it ended in 2019. But I saw just a clip of him as an attorney, like just telling off a judge, and I'm like, yeah, I want to watch this. So I had to go find it. I wrote Billy Bob Thornton lawyer movie, and it popped up. And for the life of me, I forgot the name of it, but I just finished it like a couple weeks ago. And I never would have seen it if it wasn't for Instagram or wherever I was on at the time. So that's like a great avenue if you're able to get that kind of pickup to send people towards it. And I know you say it's a good old boys club, but with all of these different services out there, all these different streaming services, isn't it like a little bit easier now to get in than it was when it was just like Harvey Weinstein?
Well, there's really 8 services per se. You got the, because Netflix is the monster, and then you've got Disney, which is Hulu, and then you've got HBO Max and Warner and Paramount and Apple. So, when you look at it, the problem isn't the services, the problem is the feeders, and they would go to a producer and they'll say, Zia or Gabriella, let's say you're producers, I'm going to give you a 3-picture deal. You guys go out and find the shit because you know where to find or how to do it, right? And then Henry comes along. You don't want to deal with me because there's 800 other people sending you crap, right? And you don't want to get unsolicited stuff. This is another problem because they go, I sent that to him and the guy took it and he ended up ripping me off. I'm suing him. So they don't even want to go down that road. So an agent says, I'm sending you stuff. Here it is. My case is a little bit different because the book is already on Amazon. It's doing really well. 97% of the people love it. So the people that have read it, I've got over 300 reviews, love it. So at least that's some traction. But then again, there's thousands of books. There's thousands of books published every month. So you've got a lot of noise. Then the question is, how do you break through the noise? And just like in anything, you plant seeds, and eventually something's going to grow.
Henry, before Alexa tells me we have to move on, it sounds like there's a problem and it needs somebody who can be innovative and use tech to solve it. I'm just saying that's just from what I've heard.
Well, here's the thing, there are several AI companies that are doing text to video and they're really good. But I think 24 months from now, maybe 18 to 24 months, they'll be good enough to say, listen, here is the script written text-wise for video. It can be done at a fraction of the cost. Let's say my series is a $10 million series. It can do it for $2 million, right? And let's say it'll take me a year to produce. It can do it in 2 months, right? And you're like, wait, 80% of the cost? And how are you kidding me? Except for the A players, the Tom Cruises of the world, I don't really, I watch these Netflix things. I've never heard of these people. I'm like, it's still pretty good.
Yeah.
And if I watched it and I didn't know whether it was a real person or AI, would it matter? No, I just want to be mindlessly entertained, right? So I think that's going to be a huge dynamic in the industry as well in the next couple of years.
Awesome. Henry, let's just switch. Do you want to go, Gabby? You have a question?
Yes.
Yeah, go.
Yes. Okay, Henry, what's a failure you are now secretly grateful for?
What's a failure that I what?
You are now secretly grateful for.
That I'm secretly grateful for. Wow. Pretty much being born. Actually, that wasn't there are so many failures that you learn from. And if you don't learn, then you die. I think the biggest failure was not getting good enough attorneys for agreements or knowing agreements that we had. An example would be simple. The company I mentioned that had the exclusive agreement, right? Agreements. We had been in multiple litigations with the guy because he was litigious. And the last one where we had the right, but there was a technicality, we lost. And we had $1 million settlement. I did not have $1 million. I was literally looking at it going, well, my next question will be, do you want fries with that burger? I had no idea what I was going to do. Now, one of the suppliers who was, getting images and virtual tours from us, he ran the largest tour company in the country, said, I like you guys. I don't like bullies. I will buy equity in your company to pay off your debt. 3 days before the settlement was due. I literally saved my ass. So if I failed at that, I wouldn't. So that failure also helped me understand you really need to be more aware of the contractual stuff. You also need to be aware of what goes on, because most bigger businesses will try to sue small businesses out of existence because it's a strategy, right? Thanks for that depressing note, Henry.
So he's secretly happy because he's now such a big business. He's going to start suing the little guys out of business.
Yeah, no, I have no bit. Yeah, no. Anamoya Media, my
Henry,
company, is not that big, really. It's just a shell company. All right, sorry, go on.
Henry, you mentioned you were in Chile. So tell us that experience. What was your favorite part of Chile? What was that interaction, culturally, everything?
Well, Chile is an amazing country. One of the most, even at the time when I was there in the early 90s, it was one of the most advanced Latin American countries. The culture is amazing, right? The people were amazing. And there was a time when I was down there and I was doing well. And I thought to myself, and I was dating a Chilean girl, and I thought to myself, I think I could spend the rest of my life here. I believed I would be the rest of my time in Chile. I'd move there. But eventually, the infrastructure things are hard to change. The traffic and the smog, and this was before unleaded gas. It was pretty bad in Santiago, and little things are hard to change from the government perspective, right? And then you look at people who make good money, and they're kind of living in a house with barbed wire. If they're making really good money, they have barbed wire and they have guards and they have security and they go with armored cars because somebody wants to kidnap them or their family. And I thought to myself, all right, even if I did well here, I don't want to live like that. I'd really live in the US as a middle-class American and not have to worry about my security. And literally, that was one of the reasons I decided to head back to the United States.
Interesting. How about the food and Spanish?
Oh, the food was amazing because, listen, 3,000 miles of coastline, the Chilean fruit, you get a lot of your fruit, your strawberries and raspberries and blueberries and stuff from Chile, the salmon from Chile. Hablas español, me imagino, pero
Exactly.
tenía que hablar más con acento chileno, ¿cachai?
Uh-huh.
There's actually a saying in Chile that if you are waiting for a bus there is called a wawa. You're esperando wawa, right? Cubans, I think, say that as well. But I mean, no, you're esperando wawa. A wawa is a baby, right? So if you're esperando wawa, you're waiting for a bus. But here, if you're esperando wawa, you're pregnant. So I say to a friend, ay, tengo una amiga está esperando wawa ya 8 meses. Like, you have been waiting for a bus for 8 months? I'm like, no, she's pregnant. She's like a month. Yeah. So
Oh, wow.
I'm married
Henry,
a Venezuelan.
you have a lot of experience in so many things, industries, countries and everything. So that's awesome. What are some green flags when you see a new opportunity and some red flags that you're like, no, I'm definitely not going that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. The green flags are, oh, that sounds interesting. I want to do it. Like, when I'm in a laundromat and I want to play Pac-Man and there's no video game machine. To me, opportunity. I'm not the only one with that problem. Red flags are people that don't understand, at least now I understand more about it, that don't understand how is the consumer going to get there. First of all, I'm not a big fan of, direct to consumer businesses. I like B2B and I like SaaS, recurring revenue. But when somebody says, listen, I'm going to do this, and there's 2% of the market, and if we just get that, then we're gazillionaires. And I'm like, okay, so how are you going to let the Marias and the Gabrielas of the world know that this exists? Oh, social media. I'm like, okay, you and everybody else. Okay, the red flags are this, and I did the same thing. These charts that just hockey stick up to the right. I just add 10% and 12% here, and this is how it's going to grow. It's not like that in the real world, and a lot of times when people say, well, you got to be at the right place at the right time. At the end of the day, I think you're going to be at the wrong place at the right time, or you're going to be at the right place at the wrong time, much more so than you're going to be at the right place at the right time. So you're going to continue plugging away, planting seeds, and then eventually I didn't know there was a problem with the travel industry images on the internet. I had no idea. But I happened to be in the space helping virtual tours, and oh, that is a problem. I would not have known to look there to see that there was a problem unless I was involved there. So you will find things and you'll see a need, an opportunity, solve a problem. If it's not really solving a problem, let's say I want to open up a boutique on clothing on, downtown. Really? Is that a problem? I mean, what problem are we solving here, right? So those are the red flags. If you're not solving a problem and it's a vanity thing, then, that would be a challenge for me.
I have a question for you. Let's say Ice Portal had failed. What do you think you will be doing right now instead?
That's a very good question. If Ice Portal had a fail, I would probably be working in one of the travel companies that I was, working with as an executive, either marketing executive or something in management. I don't know that I would have had, well, I know I wouldn't have had the money, but the umption, the strength to go and start over again. Because it's easy to make mistakes and fail when you're young because you don't have a lot, you don't have far to fall, right? I don't have a house. I don't have a family. So what? I live on my friend's couch for a couple of years or months, whatever. But when you have a house and a mortgage and a family and kids, then it gets a little bit more challenging where you can't take as many risks. So the fact that I took that risk, I had a family, I had a mortgage, I had things. I think I would have gone into a safer thing and probably worked in corporate America somewhere.
Well, thank God that failed. Thank God that didn't fail.
Yeah, right?
You'd be miserable, man. You'd be miserable.
We'd be having this conversation from my double wide.
With a natty light.
Henry, do you have a book or a podcast or a person like a mentor that you follow or like inspire you to, for example, be all the time in the knowledge of or tech, or is there any book or something that really changed your life?
Well, yeah, Traction for one. I mean, it was a simple, I have really no clue what I'm doing. And this was like, Traction, get a grip on your business. And I'm like, okay, so that's what that means. Oh, vision is, and so this is what culture means. Oh, yeah. And, people would say, you need to have KPIs. I'm like, yeah, what the fuck is a KPI, right? I didn't even know what that meant, right? And so it would say, here's your scorecard, here are your KPIs, here's what you're looking for. So Traction probably changed my business life more than anything else, right? My mentor was Bill LaMacchia. He was the guy that salvaged me, that ran the tour company. And I think these days, I like listening to podcasts because, I get little, gleams of information regularly. And I also like listening to audiobooks. I do a lot of that as well.
What would you say is your go-to podcast right now?
I like Prof G, Scott Galloway, Professor G. He has several different podcasts, Raging Moderates, the Prof G Cause, Prof G Markets, and Kara Swisher with the technology podcast.
So let me ask you, with you doing as much as you've done, what was it about that podcast that turned you onto it?
Well, first of all, Scott is painfully honest and brutal about things, and he has really these horrible crass jokes. I'll give you an example of one he had yesterday. This is for Zia. What sexual position makes the ugliest offspring? Ask your dad. So.
Oh, wow.
I really wish you didn't make that joke. They're going to use this for the next 2 weeks.
I told you, he's really, but I love that about him because that's like old school. But he's also incredibly I want to say on the spot about talking about the youth and the next generation and politics and how we've gotten to a point where we're like, guys, pull your head out. And, even today I was listening to him this morning and he was talking about ageism in, because Biden's got this prostate thing and we've got ageism in the government. It's like, guys, they don't care about anything but some of themselves. It's like, we need an age limit, right? So I don't want to get into the politics here, but yeah, I was messing with you, don't you?
I thought that was fantastic. I'm one of those, I can give it and take it, so I'm good with it, man. I like
right.
it. I'm good. It's good. So it's interesting that you said that because I think podcasts now have changed the way we get information. Before, everybody only watched CNN. You got everything you wanted to get was all from CNN, and then Fox showed up, and then MSNBC was there, and then now now you got news agent. Now I would say more people probably get their news from podcasts and social media than they do from news sources.
Yeah.
So it's funny to say, because I get the majority of my news from podcasts as well. I listen to PVD almost like pretty religiously. I think that's awesome. He's based in Fort Lauderdale and his story is awesome. And it's similar to you of like, it's fun. It's got politics in it. It's got business in it. And it's all about what's going on today and how can we adjust our life? What do we need to be doing? What should we be looking at? Because, like obviously we're looking to grow our business. You're looking to grow your business. What are the things we need to be looking at? Because that's really what matters at the end of the day. Yeah. So it's good that you said that because I think we're all in the same boat. And Aleja, make sure we get that podcast, the name of that, and so we can tag it out and send it out because I think it's going to be something a lot of our viewers are going to enjoy listening.
Yes, yeah, of course. So Henry, we have a little game for you. So just Gabby, go ahead and you have just to pick one of the answers. So yeah, you too as well if you want to be part of it. So just go ahead, Gabby.
Okay. So Henry, what do you prefer, travel or tech?
Travel.
A script or a spreadsheet?
Spreadsheet
too.
Jungle or boardroom?
Ooh, it's about the same, isn't it? Depends on the boardroom. Some boardrooms can be long and really what. I've had. I don't have good memories of the jungle, so let's just say boardroom.
I'll take the air conditioning.
Yeah.
Tea or tequila?
Tequila.
And Tia?
Tequila. It's not even close. A nice añejo. Ooh.
Oh my God, I love añejo. Casamigos añejo. Bring it on.
And this one is my favorite. Chilean food or American food?
Chilean, por favor.
That's not come on.
Our
food, like when you come to America, it's a smorgasbord of everybody else's food, unless you want something deep fried or barbecued. So no, you got to go Chilean.
You'd be surprised. My wife and I and daughter went to Patagonia a few months ago in February, and we went to this place in the middle of nowhere, and the food was amazing. But there's just from guanaco, which is a whole nother story, to the fruits and the fish and the seafood. It's fresh and there's, oh my God. Yeah, easily. That's an easy one.
So Henry, I'm going to give you, I don't tell this to a lot of people because I don't like people showing up and ruining this for me. But there's a place, where do you live in Florida? Are you
I live in Hollywood.
If you take 75 west, get out to Florida City and then go down south about 30 minutes, you get to the port that every stone crab comes in from. It's about 30% off of everywhere else you go, and it's as fresh as it gets. It comes off the boat onto your plate.
Yeah. What's the name of the place?
There's two over there. The one we go to is called Triads or Triads. And it's like, when you go there, it's also got the oldest rum port, and it's an underground railroad that comes. It's like an underground rail system that comes in because it was during Prohibition that they would bring it in from Cuba. It's maybe a block down the street. It's such a cool little city. Nobody knows about it. Now they will, but
I think, years ago, a friend of mine, he has a jet company. He has a private plane. He says, meet me at the airport. I met him at the airport. We flew over there. We had lunch. Instead of driving like an hour or hour and a half, it took us 12 minutes. You know, you land in a strip, you get picked up by a car, you eat lunch, you come back. And I do remember there was a place in the middle of nowhere, this little, just amazing stone crab. So yeah,
With that mustard sauce, forget about it.
of course.
I feel bad for the rest of the country for not knowing how delicious stone crabs are, because it's only in South.
Uh-oh.
We lost him. He was just in love of the
I'm
food.
gonna
We
finish.
lost
South Florida.
Florida.
Anyway.
Smile on his face.
Now you're back. Henry, this was an amazing podcast. Thank you so much. Let us know, please, what is your next project? Something that we should, just learn about you right now. Please, everybody, go and follow Henry Woodman on LinkedIn. He has a lot of things to do. And also, if they want on Instagram, I saw your pictures in Patagonia. Beautiful, amazing. What is your last project? Your coming project, Henry?
Well, now what I do is, if I'm not working on Slippin' or the Reincarnation of Marie, which is the name of the book, my wife and I, we travel. So I'm leaving tomorrow for a little trip to see a friend, and then we're going to Utah to go to Zion and Bryce Canyon. Then we're going to go to Norway. So we just like to travel.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Thank you, Henry, so much. Thank you, Sia, as always, for your comments. Thank you, Gabby. And thank you guys for your amazing questions. This was an amazing podcast. Stay tuned. We have more podcasts coming next week as well. Good luck, Henry, with your travels, safe travels, and amazing journey. Thank you so much for sharing everything with us.
Mil gracias.
Till the next time,
Have a
guys.
good one,
Thank
guys.
you.
Yes.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.